thanks for talking to me. I
Of
appreciate
course.
it. I know it's not obviously not the same thing, but I've been into with digital art using AI. So when I found out you guys did this, I was really interested, and I wanted to watch the documentary and wanted to talk to you.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.
It is the same. I mean, it's very similar.
Yeah, I mean, we made all the album art. So that, I mean, that's
I
digital
noticed.
art.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, they
It is.
released the model open source now though, so you can do it on your own computer, which makes it
Yeah,
nice.
it's the beginning of the end.
Yeah, exactly. So the one thing I wanted to know, and obviously you talked about doing this because it's different, but what was sort of, I guess, the spark that made you guys want to do it? Like, where did that come from? What was your interest in it?
I think, yeah, it was my spark originally, but yeah, I've always been interested in interrogating new technologies and trying to break them and try to misuse them, to expose, like, yeah, expose what's hidden from us, I guess. I'm really interested in, in breaking tools. And so, yeah, this was the newest tool available, and it seemed like it was going to be important for our future. So I wanted to know more about it, and I wanted us to learn about it through making things with it.
Yeah, we're not very good at like book learning or whatever. If we want to understand something really, like the best way to do it for us is just to try to figure out how to make something with it, because then we're going to have to come up against all those challenges and have to solve all the problems and get a deeper understanding of the thing.
Yeah, and since we saw that AI was not just one tool for one specific medium, that it was touching every aspect of art making, we felt like the album was the perfect medium to showcase all of the different things that it would touch, from typography to visual art to the audio itself,
to language,
to music composition. So it felt like a great way to show all of the things.
Right. Were the two of you kind of scared though when he came up with this at first?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Jona has a tendency of like coming up with a really big idea and then being like, let's do it. And then we like, the only way out, it's like a roller coaster. The only way out is through. Like, we've got to just go through the entire experience. And oftentimes it sounds so ambitious and overwhelming that we're like, oh God, but once you begin the process, it's always rewarding. There's always something. And like, oftentimes these like grand ambitions seem beyond our scope. And then once we get into it, we realize that like, we're exactly the people that should be doing this. Like, it's not the computer scientists and the coders necessarily who should only have access or understanding of this stuff. It's the people who are overwhelmed by it, who don't fully understand it, who feel like it's, you know, the consequences might like displace their careers and muddle up their world. Like, we are the people that should be messing around with this technology and trying to figure out how to make sense of it and how to like make it part of what we do, so that it can never, what we do can never be taken away from us, if that makes sense.
Right. What about you, Rob? Were you apprehensive?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think that, I think we worked together enough on enough projects to know that the outcome wasn't going to be, you know, the mission statement was there, like, let's hand over the reins to AI, but we're going to end up with something that's off that mark, and we're probably going to be able to be happy with it just based on, you know, our working relationships and our history, you know, past results. So I wouldn't say fear is the right word, you know, or apprehension, but just like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think there was a concern that we wouldn't end up with something interesting at the end of it.
Now, obviously the album is out now and the documentary is coming out, but did you announce, I guess, like to your fans ahead of time that you were doing this? Because you didn't. Because I was going to say, I'm kind of curious, I guess, the reactions, because I know just from the little bit I've done how you get all those, it's not art, it's the computer, you know, all that stuff. So kind of what was the first, I guess, positive and negative reactions that you
Well, initially you wanted to release the album with like no context, as sort of like we would release the album, see how people respond to it, and then use the documentary as like this
the
reveal
explainer,
of like, hey, this was actually all made by AI. But for various reasons, we didn't want to do like a gotcha type thing. And also the documentary took a lot longer to make than the album did. So there ended up being sort of a sort of more staggered rollout of stuff where we kind of wanted to be much more transparent about what we were doing, because there was so much that we were learning along the way, and there was a spirit of discovery, and like we were becoming aware of the enormous complexity of this stuff. Like, I mean, going into it, we really thought like, oh yeah, we'll just train an algorithm, press some buttons and blah. And but then the more we got into it, we realized like, oh no, we're actually like working a lot and we're doing a lot of stuff and we're doing something that no one's ever done before really in this specific way. And we have to try to explain what we're doing to people. Otherwise, they're not going to get that. I mean, they're going to have that reductive knee-jerk response of saying it's not really art because an AI made it. And so we tried to be as open and transparent about it as possible and explain it. It is like complicated.
Yeah. So with our like super fans, we've had incredible conversations about what this all means and what it means for the future and the kind of processes that we're that we're used to using to create music. It was really great. I think all of the like close conversations we had, the wider press didn't understand it or even touch it at all. And now I'm grateful that the movie took longer to come out, because now like the greater consciousness around AI art making has caught up with where we were at. Yeah, and it's a completely different landscape now. People understand like what these tools can do, and now that like DALL-E 2 exists and is so widely used, people understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, they have a better sense of it. They're not just thinking like Skynet, you know, HAL 9000. That's where we were at in 2016, 2017. There wasn't a lot of like literacy culturally about what these tools were. There's still, I mean, it's still really complicated and it's still difficult for a lot of people to understand. And a lot of the press talks about it in really reductive terms, or
the right conversations still aren't happening. And I hope that our film can help that a little bit. But
the one thing I want to ask is for you, I mean, you kind of make the comment, I know in there about you didn't add, you subtracted and that, but I assume that there was also kind of like, to some extent, picking and choosing which lines you used in that, just because I know just from like making prompts, people don't understand. Like you said, it's not just push button, make art. It's not that easy. What are some of the things that you kind of, the human, I guess, involvement that you guys had?
So much.
We were involved at every step. So at the time we were making this, the models that we were using, for one, couldn't generate any kind of structured song. It could only generate clips. So what we ended up doing was generating thousands upon thousands of riffs. So like 2 to 4 bars maximum of notated music. So just sheet music, not any kind of audio or anything like that. So once we had these thousands of little pieces of sheet music, we had to then audition them by putting them into the computer and like testing them out on synthesizers and being like, okay, this will be a bass line, this will be a vocal melody, this will be a drum pattern, this will be a keyboard line, a guitar line, like any of that kind of stuff. So it ended up like a Scotch tape method, like a cut up method of just putting all of these pieces together to make songs, since there wasn't any model available to create structure.
There wasn't even a model available at the time that could generate chords. So there's not any chords on the album.
Yeah, it's all monophonic. It's all, it's pretty crazy.
And we did the same thing for the song lyrics. So we had this massive corpus of stuff that we trained this text generating model on. We got this huge document, this big thing that we printed out. And then we were just I was literally highlighting lines that I liked and we would collage. It was essentially a collage process.
And since those two models didn't talk to each other at all, it's like, Photoshop and Premiere or something like that. So we had to then transplant the lyrics that Claire chose onto the melodies that we chose. So they're like two incompatible things that we then had to break language apart on top of these melodies,
like syllable by syllable, to make them fit in each individual note. That the thing, it was,
and like we didn't have to do this, but we were very stringent about how we wanted this to be and how we wanted it to sound
good
too. It's gotta sound good.
We wanted it to sound good and just sound like us, not just like this new alien form. Like it needed to feel like us, which, I mean, inherently, since we were making it, it will sound like us. But yeah, we were very conscious of it fitting into our oeuvre.
And then everything's performed live. There's like synthesizers and stuff, but we're playing all these parts live. I'm singing all these melodies. We're producing and arranging everything. We're recording everything in the studio in Marfa. So there's like, the human component is significant. I mean, you could give 15 bands the same giant chunk of text and the same, 400 audio clips of different MIDI notes and tell them to make a record, and they would make a completely different record. It's like we're basically just working from generated source material and kind of in collaboration with these systems, rather than like letting the systems write the songs for us, which wasn't possible at the time and is not desirable to us even now.
Yeah, I guess the best analogy is it's like a multi-dimensional magnetic poetry.
Kind of,
Yeah,
I kind of wonder now if there's probably a lot more it can do. This, this many years later, you probably can do most of it on your own. Sorry, do you have
Yeah,
anything to add, Rob? You haven't talked much. I want to make sure you get to talk too.
No, yeah, yeah, there definitely are. I mean, even in the film, we show at the end these tools that you're able to sort of like create songs from whole cloth. But you know, if those tools existed at the time, I don't think it would have been any fun. If it took, you know, if we were
Yeah.
able to just push a button and create a record, I don't think we would have been happy with the product. So yeah, I think we're fortunate that we had to sort of like wade through the muck to get to where we got to.
Yeah, and even the tools today like couldn't make chain tripping. They couldn't make any of those songs because like even though the songs are still pulled from our back catalog and still like part of us, they're also different than something we would have made just on our own. So yeah, I don't think there's any model that could create any of the songs on chain tripping.
Because people change, you know. I feel a lot of AI is structured on this idea that like if you take this historical data and then you like project it into the future, you just get like more of the same of what came before. But artists don't work that way. Artists are evolving all the time, like based on their relationships with one another and what's going on in their lives and, you know, their relationship to their own past work. So like you can never mimic that process of like transformation that occurs when you sit down to make something new.
Yeah.
Right. You make me think of what I do, because that I take a lot of pieces and Photoshop them together. That's kind of like what I like to do. So it's not just pure output from there.
Yeah,
So,
we like to say the output is not the end.
right. So I know you said in the documentary, obviously you wouldn't do this it the same way again because you do everything different, but is there any part of it that you could see reusing again when you make another album to help you? Or is it like, do you think that would happen? Or
Well, and I don't think that it could help us at all because it's definitely doesn't make anything easier. But in terms of like, yeah, wanting to generate things that sound like a little out of character, a little bit wilder, maybe. I don't know. Rob, what do you think?
well, I think that like yeah, I don't know if we would even need to necessarily go back to the tools, but just going through the process of using those tools so often and for such a long time, I think it has sort of shifted our perception of what's possible in terms of you know, I think we talk about in the film how some of this output like challenged our physical capabilities. We were playing things or singing things that we wouldn't have normally thought to do. And so I think, you know, now we can't help but approach songwriting through that lens at this point. So in that way, you know, the tools are always with us, you know.
They're inside.
yeah, I was gonna say, what did it? Because I know you guys talked about like how it makes you look at your music different and everything. But was there anything like specifically that you kind of learned about your music that you didn't, I guess, like recognize before you started, that now you're thinking about more?
I mean, yeah, what Claire said a minute ago about, yeah, how a lot of AI tools are, yeah, they require lots of training of material. And just, yeah, the fact that there isn't a form, the only algorithm that is inside of Yacht is just that, yeah, each of us have our own algorithm that is constantly evolving. There is no like formula for how we make songs other than just like time.
Yeah. And I think like trying to play and sing, specifically for me, these melodies that are not necessarily like super tricky, they're just weird, you know, they're like, they're not created by an entity which has a body. So they're not like, they have no relationship to embodiment. When we tried to play those, we realized how much our like experiences of playing music are rooted in like what actually feels good and what we're physically accustomed to doing, like these just patterns, like these habits that are just like deeply ingrained and deeply physical, and trying to step outside of those is extremely challenging because it like, yeah, it just like makes you realize how stuck, like not stuck in a rut, but how many habits you actually have. And then when you do try to break them, you build new habits, I hope. But yeah, it's like, it really pushed us up against our limitations, I guess, our physical limitations.
Yeah, I listened to it. The only thing, and I like it, and it's really cool, but the one thing that I kind of wonder about is like, usually when you listen to music, at least to me, like I'm kind of looking for what the artist had meaning in the lyrics. So, you know, obviously you guys got it from the computer. Have you, after the fact, I guess, sort of found meaning in that part of it and connected to it in that way?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. It's something I thought about a lot. I mean, obviously there's a level of meaning that came through just the process of like collaging and arranging little scraps of lyrics together. We were thinking a lot about making it fit within the algorithmic structure, of course. There were lots of constraints there. But in my mind, the songs all mean different things. It's just that that meaning is kind of evolving all the time. And every time I sing them, I'm like, oh, maybe that's what it means, you know? Like there's a kind of mutation that occurs, which happens normally anyway. Like there are songs we've been performing for 15 years that when we wrote them we were children, and like we were thinking about very different things than we're thinking about now, and now when I sing them they're about something else in my mind, and they're also like colored by the experience, and also other people are projecting their own meaning on them too. I mean, that's what we do with art. Like we project our own thoughts and experiences, and we think that these songs are written about us, but you know, they're about the artist's experience. So there's always this like shifting meaning that's already happening in music. And I think with these songs, like I have my own interpretation. It might be different from theirs. It's different from the audiences. And I kind of like this sort of collective meaning making thing that we're all doing together. It's true that it's like trickier to grab onto, you know, it's much more slippery and elusive, but there's something really interesting about that for me. I mean, it's not necessarily the way I want to write songs forever, but it's a different like relationship to meaning that was fun to play with for this album.
Makes sense. You have anything to add, Rob? I just want to make sure you get to talk. I don't want to cut you off before I move. I know I talk fast.
Well, I think, you know, Claire had undoubtedly the most intimate relationship with the words. You know, she spent the most time on the ground cutting, you know, highlighting and cutting up and pasting together. So, yeah, no, I think she summed it up perfectly.
Okay, cool. Now, what about the documentary part? Is it strange? I mean, obviously you guys have been performing, so I guess maybe it's not as strange for you like it would be for me, but is it weird having somebody follow you around all the time? Did that ever kind of get on your nerves, or was it just a cool experience? Like, how did that go?
Yeah, I never became comfortable with them around, because like, yeah, we perform, but that's like a very specific version of ourselves that we get to show, and we hadn't ever let anyone in on the creative process, and especially like such a vulnerable time in the creative process where we're trying a whole new way of creating,
and we're like fucking up a lot.
Yeah, and we didn't look good a lot of the time, and we were having a hard time. So no, I didn't like it most of the time. I loved the filmmakers and everyone involved. It was really great to have them around just as like friends and people that we got to know. But the actual documentation of it was awkward for me most of the time.
Yeah.
I found that like the experience, I mean, the film obviously follows us in the studio and all that, but it also, you know, we went and traveled and we did interviews with lots of people.
Yeah.
And there was like a level of access that we got just by virtue of having a film crew. Like we were able to have conversations with people that I don't think would have given us the time of day necessarily if we just come in like, hey, we're a band. So in that sense, like I think it was really beneficial because we went into the studio with a lot more knowledge and understanding of the landscape and like rudimentary understanding of the technology. I mean, obviously we're not coders, but we at least talk to enough people to feel like, okay, we kind of get what's going on here, like behind the scenes, under the hood, which I think was really like an instructive part of the process. And then by the time we got into the studio, we'd been doing all these, like, we'd been filming interviews, we'd been doing a lot of stuff with the filmmakers. I personally felt pretty comfortable with them because we'd just been hanging out for like 2 years at that point. So it was just kind of, they were there. But also there's a lot of stuff that you don't see in the film. Obviously, we were in the studio for like much longer than the 2 days that you see on camera.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was in a press release, I want to say, one of the things that was sent. You were showing the film a lot on some of it and then performing like for the people to see the film, right? That was my understanding. Okay, cool. Yeah, I know. It's like I was waiting to see kind of what it came out like. That's why I went and listened to it after, because I wanted to know what it sounded like. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been fun. We've done a couple of, when the film first premiered at CPH Docs in Copenhagen, we did a screening and then immediately afterwards played a show. And that like worked super well because people were able to see the entire, I mean, it's not often you get this experience. You get to see the entire process from like inception to the final performance.
Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, it was good. So we've been trying to do a lot of that around the film. We're doing that in New York and in Portland and a few other places.
Very cool. Well, like I said, I liked listening to it. I think it sounds interesting, and I want to listen to. I need to listen to some of your other music too to compare it. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but I think it's pretty cool, and I'm curious to see kind of where this goes and who, I guess, adopts it and who doesn't, because I know right now, at least even in graphic art, there's kind of a big. You got both sides, people fighting back and forth with it. So
yeah, I mean that's always how it's been. It's how it was with synthesizers and drum machines, and like some people are going to fall in love with this new technology. Some people are going to reject it. Some people are going to exist in a kind of in-betweeny space, which I sort of feel like that's where we are. Like, there are things that are interesting about it. There are things that are scary about it. I want to be able to take what's good and make it part of our work in a way that protects us, like, or insulates us from like the threat of being displaced. Like, if we bring it onto our team, it can't hurt us.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't stop you from doing the artistic side of it, I think that's what's important.
Yeah.
It is a tool rather than making it for you.
Yeah.
So
All
it's,
right. Well, thank you, all of you. I appreciate it. And hopefully, since I know a little bit about it, maybe hopefully whatever I write, people will understand a little bit more, maybe.
I'm
when
sure
I
you'll do a wonderful job.
try it anyway. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Have a good day,
Yeah.
guys.
You too.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.